Hello board game brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every single week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you do want to stay up to date, feel free to subscribe down below. But before I get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about, and I just have one to let you know about this week, and that's that there is a new game announced from CMON, and this one is called Nova Era. This one's going to be a civilization building game, and it doesn't look like this one will be going to crowdfunding because, well, it says coming soon on their website, but if I go over to boardgames.ca, it looks like I can already go ahead and purchase this one. If you do want to learn more about the game, there's a bunch of info on CMON's website, but it looks like content creators have started uploading their own reviews and coverage for this, and of course you can just go ahead and find that over on YouTube after you watch this video. Other than that, I do want to give a quick shout out to Alex over at Boardgame Co. because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns. I do this every single week, but he posts a video at the start of each month, going over the entire month and letting you know of what you can expect. We are wrapping up January here, so you should expect his video to go up for February very soon here, but he also has a ton of other content going into all sorts of different games, both on crowdfunding and not. So if you do like to have as much info about all the different games and what's going on in the industry, you'll definitely want to check him out, and I will have a link to his channel down below. And he is also hosting the Level Up event this weekend, which is running from the 31st to the 2nd, and there is going to be a ton of different content creators there and designers and just anyone who wants to come from the community. I will be there and I'd be happy to play some games, so if you are able to make it to New Jersey this weekend, feel free to grab yourself a badge and come play some games. As many of you know, I did just also get back from my trip to Punta Cana. I'm home for just a couple days and then I'm flying off to New Jersey for the Level Up retreat, but if you are wondering how it went, the main reason I was traveling was to go on a fishing trip with my brother and some friends, and this is not something I would recommend going on unless you really like fishing, and I also probably would recommend that you don't take your whole family on these trips. Unless you are already familiar with being out on the ocean, it is really not forgiving. The waves out there are massive, they pick up the entire boat, and it is really easy to get seasick. I didn't, thankfully, but I definitely was feeling it at some points. Our guide actually mentioned that entire families will go out and all get sick, and he's the one that's actually reeling in the fish. We did a 6-hour trip, and one of us did end up returning his morning bagel to the ocean, and the rest of us, I'm not sure how much longer we would have lasted. But if you do love fishing and you think you can handle it, it was definitely worth the experience, and we did catch some fish. We were hoping for a sailfish or a marlin, although marlin are more common in the summertime, but we ended up just catching barracuda, but it was still an awesome time. We'll just have to book another trip in the future. The original plan was to go out for 2 days on the boat, but it was just too windy and the waves were too crazy that first day, so we did only end up going out for just the 1 day. But in no way did that diminish the trip, and whenever I'm traveling, it's really all about the food, and the food in Punta Cana was amazing. We were off resort the entire time, so we were just randomly exploring different places that we found on the beaches or in the various towns. Everyone was really nice. We made a few friends out on the beach as well who were locals to the area, and they actually had a bunch of fishing rods that they brought with them to go fishing on the beach, so they actually let us fish with them, so in a way we did get a second fishing trip out of it in the end. But I am flying out to Level Up Retreat tomorrow morning, so I should probably get to the actual video and let you know of the campaigns launching this week, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on February 1st, and this one is called Shadows, Heroes, and Monsters. And this one looks like a really fun and well-designed card combat game. We're going to be fighting against the other players, as well as 3 different monsters throughout the entirety of the game. Something that I really like about this game is that there's a ton of variability because there's a bunch of different heroes that you can play as, and then you're also going to be taking their associated deck, but then at the start of the game, players are going to be randomly dealt 10 cards that are going to be added as different cards that you can acquire throughout the game. This means that even if you choose the same character over again in a following game, there's still going to be a ton of new options and cards and strategies to choose from. On top of that, there's a bunch of different monsters offered in the box, but like I said, you're only going to be including 3 in a given game, which means that the different combinations of monsters that you'll see is going to vary every single game as well. well. Another thing I really like is that this is a game that plays over a series of rounds, and each round you're going to have a different player acting as the leader. What's really cool about this is that when you're the leader, you get a few different benefits, but one of those benefits is to draw different attack cards from the monster deck and then distribute those amongst the players however you see fit. That's a really nice perk already, but as an added benefit, you also are going to be putting those cards face down, so only you know what each of the cards are hiding. This game also has a few more unique aspects to it with the way that the currencies work in this game, as well as the way that the cards are played based on their initiative values. And I'll get into all of that in just a second here because the publisher was kind enough to send me a prototype copy of the game, so I do want to thank them for that. And I have it all set up here for 3 players, and they did give me a playmat, but this is a completely optional buy. It does come with its own playmat included in the game, which is just a little bit more of a condensed version of the playmat, which might be a better option for you if you are limited on table space, but if you want to have that full experience and the really nice neoprene touch, then the playmat is a good option as well. I do have this set up as a 3-player game, but because I do have limited space to fit all this on the camera here, I just have myself set up using the player mat, and then I just have the 2 other players set up over on the right here. Your starting hero card goes into this slot in the bottom left, and like I said, there's a bunch of different heroes to choose from, and they all have some different effects and stats, and a summary of how your hero operates is provided in the bottom of the card. The 3 different stats in the top right hand corner of your card are primarily used to meet different requirements for different cards that you're going to be acquiring throughout the game, and then the number in the green in the middle right hand side of your card is your character's health. The starting deck that goes with your hero is over on the right here. And these will have your factions icon in the top right corner, but they'll also have different initiative values, which I'll come back to later, as well as all sorts of different effects. All these cards are available to use at the beginning of the game, but you will be adding more cards to the deck throughout the game, and that's where this other deck comes into play over here. And the way that this was set up is that these are just 10 cards that were randomly drawn to each of the players at the beginning of the game, and these are just a subset of cards from a massive deck of cards which I have in the box here, and this random draw of cards is just the recommended way to do it for your first few games. But if you do want to get into more advanced setup, there is options for that as well. In the top right corner of these cards, there's different requirements that you have to meet first before you're able to actually use that card. The way that you meet those requirements is by increasing the stats on your hero card, and the way that you do that is by buying item cards throughout the game, which will get connected to your hero card, adding those stats together. The game offers 2 different types of currencies. There's your experience points and your gold, and the experience points are useful for getting more of these cards into your draw deck. The gold, of course, is useful for buying more item cards, which will be in a shared display, and each of these items will have their own amount of gold displayed on them, and of course that's going to be the cost of that card. The nice thing about gaining an item card or one of these skill cards is that anytime that you do that, you're also going to be gaining a Shadow Stone. These Shadow Stones are the key to winning the game, and the end game is going to be triggered anytime that a player has 9 of these, or when that 3rd boss is defeated. There are some other ways to gain Shadow Stones, such as completing your private objective, and each player is going to be drawing 2 of these at the start of the game and choosing one that they want to commit to, and if you are able to complete it, it's going to be revealed at the end of the game, granting you a Shadow Stone if you were able to complete it. Being the player to take out one of the monsters will also gain you the rewards that that monster has to offer, and as I mentioned, there are 3 different monsters that you're going to be playing with throughout a game, and each of these monsters are going to be increasing in their difficulty, but also increasing in their rewards. There's only ever 1 monster revealed at a time, so this is the one that we're going to be starting with, and you can see it has a very simple reward of just 1 gold, has 5 health, and also has its unique set of attacks here that are going to be correlating to different monster attack cards that are going to be drawn throughout the game. If we compare this one to the second monster, you can see that the rewards get a little bit better, with this one granting you a card, but of course it is more difficult to defeat, and then that only gets even more difficult with the final monster, and this one does gain you a Shadow Stone directly. Each of the different hero decks will also have 1 or 2 of these cards that have a star on them. What that means is that card is just always in play, and it's going to be granting you whatever special ability is outlined on that card. For my character, anytime that I defeat a monster, I get to recover 1 health while all opponents lose 1 health. As I mentioned before, your different action cards that you're going to be acquiring throughout the game all have different initiative values, but the initiative of 0 is a special one because if you ever get a card that's initiative 0, that's just going to be immediately going into your field here, and each player does start with one of those that can be used to help defend you against various attacks. The way this specific card works is that if you ever take full damage from an attack, you can then flip it to its dodge side, which will allow you to block 5 damage the next time that you are targeted for another attack. The dodge also grants you a health if it's still visible at the end of the round, but whether you're using it to get health or to reduce the damage of an attack, it is going to be flipping back to its original side. The last card I want to show you before we get into a round here is just this leader card, and this is just a card that keeps track of which player is currently the starting player. And this card outlines all the different privileges that you get as that starting player because you get to make the decision at the start of each round whether or not all players get an extra experience point or if all players get an extra gold. This is skipped for the first round, but all players do start with 1 experience point and 1 gold. What's also nice about this card is that it does also have this shield icon on the left here, and any shield icons that are visible in your display, you can actually cover up with one of your damage tokens in order to reduce the amount of damage you receive at any given time by that amount. I should also mention that some of these cards do also have this nice holographic finish. Before the first round starts, players do also draft a starting item card, and these are indicated by their green back, but you're only going to be putting out 1 more than the number of players, and since I have this set up for 3 players, we'll put 4 of these out on display. For myself, I'll draft this one that allows me to heal 2 health during the combat phase. The other player will draft this one that allows them to nullify any spells that are cast on them. And the final player will take this card, which allows them to spend it as a gold, but only when they buy a restricted item, and I'll explain what that is in a second. But when they do that, they do also have to lose 1 health. This one just gets discarded back into the box, but I guess I'll just go ahead and explain what the restricted items are. These are just very powerful item cards that have the word restricted at the bottom of the card, and when you do acquire these, you're only ever allowed to have 1 at a single time, and it's always going to be your topmost card. And the reason for that is just so that this card's always visible, so you always know that you already have a restricted card. It doesn't mean you're not able to buy another restricted card, but if you do that, you have to discard the one that you currently have. But I think we can walk through around here, and what's really nice about this game is that everything is clearly outlined on this player aid here, so we just go ahead and go through the list. And the first phase is the team up phase, and this is the phase where the leader is going to be choosing one of those 2 actions, whether all the players gain an experience point or whether they all gain a gold. Like I said, the first round, this is skipped, so we're not going to do that in this first round. But then the lead player is also going to be drawing 3 of these monster cards, looking at them in secret, and then assigning 1 to each of the other players and themselves, keeping the cards face down. These cards have different icons on them that all correlate to the different actions on the current monster's card. The strategy here, of course, is to just give yourself the card that you think is the least debilitating based on the current game state. The one that is the most damaging you'll probably want to give to the player that's currently the most ahead, but whatever you decide, you're going to be distributing 1 of those cards to each of the other players. In the next phase, all the players can look at their current deck, and then you can choose any 3 cards that you want to use for this round. Your hand limit is dictated by how many monsters have been defeated in the game, so every time a monster is defeated, your hand limit's going to be increased by 1, so after this first monster is defeated, I'll then be able to choose 4 cards to keep in my hand. And I've chosen my 3 cards here, so the remaining cards just go back to the draw deck, and the other players have chosen their cards as well. And the way that this round plays out is that we're going to be going sequentially through the numbers 1 to 6, and these numbers correlate to the initiative values on the cards. This means that first the players are going to be resolving their number 1 initiative cards in order, then their number 2 initiative cards in order, then their number 3 initiative cards in order as well. But the third phase is a special one because if a player still has a face down monster card, then that's also going to be resolved at that time. Then this just continues until that 6th time, and if you don't have a card for a specific initiative value that's currently being resolved, then you just don't play anything at that time. So we'll be resolving the number 1 initiative value cards first, And as I showed you before, I actually don't have any, so I won't be doing anything right now. But the next player in order does have a number 1 card, so they're going to go ahead and play that. And this allows them to either damage all heroes, creatures, and monsters by 1 health, or to heal all heroes and creatures by 1 health. At this point in the game, I think they're just going to damage everyone. And to indicate this, you're just going to be putting a damage marker on my hero to indicate that damage, a marker on the monster here, a damage on the other player, and then a damage on themselves because it does say to damage all heroes. But the player who used this card also has this item card, which allows them to ignore any spell that is cast on their hero. So because they have that card, I think you actually wouldn't damage them, but you would damage everyone else. So that's a really nice card to have for them. Something that's not so nice about this card is that every time you use it, it does get stunned, so you're going to have to put 2 stun tokens on it, but you will get to remove 1 stun token at the end of each round. For every card that you play that damages the monster, you do also have to reveal a monster attack card, and the first one that you're going to be revealing is the one that was drawn to you, so because this player did just damage the monster with the card, they're going to be revealing and resolving this card earlier than everyone else. The card I gave him corresponds with the block action, which means that this damage didn't actually go through, so this player only damaged me and the other player, which is still a pretty good turn. And now the last player gets to play any of their initiative 1 cards if they did add any to their hand, which they did, and this card allows them to reduce any target's health by 1. And I think they're going to go ahead and return the favor by attacking Roland here, so he's going to get 1 damage. One thing to note is that this is a spell, so his card could have been used to negate this effect, but this is also one-time use, so he no longer actually has this card. Now that we've resolved all the Initiative 1 value cards, we're going to be going through the same sequence, resolving all the Initiative 2 level cards, starting with me because I am still a lead player, but I do have 2 of these cards in my hand, and whenever you have multiple cards of the same initiative value, you're going to be choosing one to play first, and it doesn't really matter in my case, so I'll just go ahead and play this one, but then you'll be putting the second one face down, and then you can choose to use it if you want to, or depending on how this one resolves, you might choose not to use the second card, and if that's the case, you can just put it back into your draw pile. But this card allows me to deal 1 damage to a target, and if the target loses health by the attack, I then gain 1 XP. And I will also go ahead and damage Roland, and he has no way to defend against this right now, which means I do also gain that experience point. And I think I will go ahead and play my next card here, which allows me to deal damage again to any target, but this time I'm going to be dealing the amount of damage equal to my damage stat. This card also gains me an experience point, but specifically if a response action is not used to defend against it. This means that I could freely attack the monster because I know my monster card is a spell card and not a response card, or I could go ahead and attack Roland again because he didn't block my previous attack with a response card. Probably means that he doesn't have one in his hand. Or I could attack Eris because she also was damaged by Roland and she didn't use a response card then. But also we've only been dealing out single points of damage until now, so it's possible that any one of these players could be hanging onto a response card just in case someone or the monster attacks them with a more powerful attack. Because I don't know what exactly they might have, I think I'm going to go ahead and attack the monster in this case. My strength stat is a 3, which means that I do dish out 3 points of damage. But then, just like before, anytime that you attack a monster with a card, you do have to reveal a monster attack card. And I gave myself the spell card, which unfortunately allows the monster to heal 1 point of damage inflicted by me, so one of these tokens will be removed, but I still did inflict 2 damage, and this monster only has 5 health, so I do have a nice lead here. And one thing I really like about this game is that all damage accumulated on a monster is color-coded to the player, and it's only defeated if a player has reached that threshold individually. This means that if I had 4 points of damage on it, and then if Roland inflicted 1 point of damage, he would not kill the monster in this case, because even though there's 5 tokens here, you need 5 tokens of your own color in order to defeat the monster, which I do think was a really smart way to implement this mechanism. But since the monster did a spell action and not a response action, I'd get another experience point here. Now Roland's going to go ahead and play any level 2 initiative cards if he has any, and this one allows him to deal 2 damage to a target, and if the target doesn't use a response, also gain an experience point. and because he doesn't want to fall too behind on attacking the monster here, I think he is going to go ahead and do that. So deal 2 damage to the monster, and because he did already reveal his previous monster attack card, this means he's going to have to draw a new one and resolve it randomly. And in this case, he drew the spell, which was the same one that I had. So it's only going to reduce his damage by 1, which isn't too bad, and it wasn't a response, so he does also get an experience point. Eris would then go ahead and play any of her level 2 initiative cards, which she does also have, and this one allows her to deal damage to the target equal to her spell stat. I think she is also going to go ahead and attack the monster here for 2 reasons. The first one being that her spell stat is a level 3, meaning that she could potentially do 3 damage. But then she does also have a response card that she's been hanging on to because she was planning to attack the monster, and he can do quite a lot more damage than what any of the players have inflicted so far. Then she's going to reveal her monster attack card, which is an attack, which would deal 2 damage to her normally. But she's going to use this response card, which does allow her to block 2 damage, and because she's using this card as a response, she also gains 1 gold. Response cards have these little lightning bolt icons, which means that they can be played at any time. So let's grab that gold, and she will not be taking any damage. Now we go ahead and resolve any of the level 3 initiative cards, and I don't have any, so I'm not going to be playing anything. And the only other player with cards still is Roland, and he also does not have a level 3 card, so that phase is just skipped, except for the fact that it's at this point where you'd be revealing your monster card if you haven't revealed it already. Then we just go ahead and resolve any level 4 initiative cards that players might still have, and I do have one in my hand, which just allows me to gain 1 gold, and then I can also replace up to 2 items in the market, which I don't think I'm going to do. And then Roland played the same card as me, so he's also going to gain 1 gold. And since all players' cards have now been played, we're going to be moving into the build-up phase where we can actually spend our gold to buy items or spend our experience points to buy new cards from our separate deck here. And I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go through each player, but I'll just go ahead and show you what I'm going to do. And I want to go ahead and buy this Shield Strike card from my deck here. And this one requires me to have 8 health, which I already do, but then it also requires me to have 2 of those gear icons. To buy this, I'm going to have to discard 3 of my experience points, but this is going to be going into my hand now, and I can choose it freely in the next round if I want to, except for the fact that I still don't have enough gear icons. I just need 1 more, and there is a card out on the display that does have a gear icon that I could use, but unfortunately it costs 3 and I only have 2 gold right now. But because I did just purchase a card, I do gain a Shadow Stone, and I already had this one here because I forgot to move it when I was doing examples earlier, so we'll just go ahead and leave that there. All the other players would get a chance to buy cards as well, but then we'd be moving into the cleanup phase. All markers covering up any shield icons would then be removed, and one thing to note here is that I did have one of those in play because I did have the leader card, so when I was attacked earlier, rather than taking that damage, I could have instead put a marker over that shield to negate that damage, and that would have never happened. But I didn't think of it at the time, so no takes backsies this time. Players also get all their cards back that aren't currently stunned, and the ones that are going to have 1 token removed, meaning that this one will return to Eris in the following round's cleanup phase. The leader card then gets passed to the next player, which would be Roland, and then he's going to be starting the next round. I think playing that 1 round does give a good enough idea of how this game plays, but I do want to show you a couple other cards that I didn't have a chance to show off. And the first one is the predict cards, and these ones allow you to choose any other player at the table and then predict whether or not they have a certain valued initiative card in their hand. If you guess correctly, you're going to be getting the reward on that card, which could be a benefit to you or some sort of penalty for the other player. There's also the creature cards that players can gain, which do have a health of their own, and they usually have some sort of effect when you play them into your board, but then they also stay there and can give you an ongoing effect as long as they're still alive. This is just another example of that, but I did want to point this one out because I just wanted to show that you can get even more Initiative 0 cards. And what's nice about these is that they just instantly go into your station field as soon as you get them. You don't have to waste one of your cards in your hand in order to get that into play. And the rounds just continue like I explained until one of those endgame conditions are triggered. And then at that point, players are going to be adding up any additional shadow stones that they have. Then it's the player with the most that wins the game. And that's pretty much everything you need to play the game, and I think they did do a really solid job here creating a unique card fighting game that isn't like any other. If this one did look interesting to you, definitely check it out, and I will have a link to the campaign in the description down below. And launching on February 2nd, we have Oddities, and this one is a competitive set collection game where you're trying to be the first player to collect the oddest set of woodland creatures. If you're a fan of really cute artwork, I think you're really going to like the artwork in this one, but I couldn't find a whole lot of info on how the game plays. Watching the trailer, it looks like cards are going to be drafted from a shared row, and these oddities are going to be appearing in that row, but there's also other cards that could appear there as well, such as different cards with different powerful effects, misfits that you can actually send to your opponents in order to try and sabotage their plans, and they're going to have all sorts of negative effects. Then the game does also feature changing seasons that are going to be alternating throughout the different rounds in the game. These are going to be limiting the types of creatures that you can collect for those seasons. Like I said, I don't have a whole lot more info on this one, but if you do want to check it out and if it sounds interesting to you, I will have a link to the campaign in the description down below. And launching on the 3rd, we have New Beginnings, and this one is a competitive abstract strategy style game that is themed around different bees. And I think the theme is worked in really, really well because you're going to have all these different units that all represent different types or roles of bees in a hive, and the game offers multiple win conditions, giving players a bunch of different options to choose from with their strategies. But this is a game that I did think was launching a few months back, but it got pushed back until now, so I do already have footage for this one, and I'll just go ahead and roll that for you now. And this one is a 2 to 6 player abstract strategy game where the main board is going to be made up of a bunch of different flowers, hazards like wasps and diseased bees, and the queen is going to be located in the middle of the board. A neat aspect of this game is that there's actually 6 different types of bees that all operate a little bit differently, but all players are only going to be starting the game with their drone bees. You're going to have to gain resources by collecting nectar from those different flowers, and then you're going to be spending those resources in order to upgrade your drone bees into something new. On your turn, you're going to have 3 action points to spend across your bees and move them around the board and collect the various resources, and each of the bees' movement pattern is outlined on their specific tile. And this is going to allow you to do things like forage nectar, stash honey, capture opponent bees, kill wasps, or dispose of diseased bees, or of course nurture larvae in order to repopulate, and then of course upgrade those drones into new types of bees. There are a bunch of free abilities that each of your bees can do, and these will vary depending on the type of bee that they are. But in order to even qualify to win this game, you do need to end the game with one of your drone bees on one of the locations adjacent to the queen bee located in the middle of the board. Players are going to be gaining victory points from the different actions that they're able to perform, but then also by completing their own secret objectives. The player with the most points at the end of the game wins the game. And launching on the 4th, we have T.D.O, the Titan Defense Organization, but this one is now renamed to Titan Zero, and this is a campaign that I did cover a few months back, but it got pushed back until now. It looks like they did make a few changes to the game, but it's not explicitly called out on the campaign page here, so I'm not sure exactly what all the differences are. But since I did already cover this one, I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you. But if you do want to see if there's been any changes to the rules or components, feel free to check out the campaign, and I will have a link to that in the description down below. And this one is a cooperative dice rolling game where players are going to be fighting against all sorts of different titans. Each of the titans are going to have 4 different health tracks that you're trying to deplete down to 0, and they're also going to have an action deck and different effects and tokens that they leave behind as they move around on the main board. And the players are going to have a whole bunch of different heroes that they can play as, each with their own passive abilities, ultimate abilities, as well as additional abilities that you can purchase throughout the game. And something that I do really like about this game is that it is turn-based, but every single player is involved in that turn because the active player is going to get to roll all 3 of their dice, but then every other player is just going to be able to roll 1. Players are going to be assigning these dice to their own individual sheets in order to determine the actions that they're going to be performing for that turn. And this allows the players to do all sorts of different things like attack, move, heal, or defend themselves, or gain additional energy, which essentially acts like a resource in the game. Of course, the magnitude of each of these actions is going to be dictated by the value of the die that you rolled, because for each of these 4 different types of actions, you're going to have to decide which die is going to go where, with the higher die values giving you a more powerful version of that action. And of course, players are going to be using these actions to move around on that main board and attack the Titan. But like I said, the Titan has 4 different health tracks that you're trying to get down to 0. And the way that you determine which health track you are attacking is dependent on which colored space that your character is currently standing on. This means that players will be trying to manipulate the enemy's movement, but then also trying to time their attacks accordingly. And after all the players have performed their actions, you're going to be drawing a Titan card, which is just going to be giving you some instructions to the way that the enemy is going to be behaving. This usually means that they're going to be moving around and inflicting damage on the different heroes, and you lose the game anytime that 3 heroes are killed. But the nice thing here is that anytime that one of your heroes dies, you just choose a new hero from the box, and then you'll continue playing as that hero. But as soon as 3 different heroes are killed, you lose the game. Or the other way that you can lose the game is anytime 3 bases are destroyed by the Titan. And the way this works is that anytime the Titan moves into a space with a base, it's just instantly destroyed. So you're going to want to try and avoid getting into that scenario. If the players can defeat the Titan before either of those 2 things happen, then they win the game. And if you want to know more, you can check out the campaign. I have it linked in the description below. And also launching on the 4th, we have Pizza Rolls, and this one is a small hidden roll card game, but this one is not a social deduction game. The game offers both a competitive and cooperative mode of play, but the main goal here is that players are trying to create a pizza together. In the competitive mode, you're trying to create a pizza that scores best for you, but in the cooperative mode, you're going to be creating 2 different pizzas and then scoring the one that scores best for all the players. What's really cool about this game is that in each of these modes, all players score independently, which means in the versus mode, you can actually have multiple winners. The threshold for this is also really simple. All you need to do is have at least 1 point, but in the cooperative mode, if any player has less than 1 point, then all the players lose. Players start the game with 5 action cards, and these are all the cards that you get in the game. And you're going to be using those mostly to move toppings either on or off the pizza. The hidden roll comes into play with these hidden roll cards that are also going to be randomly dealt at the beginning of the game, and each of these cards are going to dictate your specific scoring conditions that only apply to you. This is why I don't really consider this one a social deduction game, because you're not actually trying to guess the other rolls of the other players or if someone's on your team or not. You're just trying to roll with the punches while competing with the other players' objectives, trying to get that 1 point, although it is helpful to see what the other players are doing, so you might have an idea of which toppings they like and which toppings they don't. And I do want to thank the publisher here because they were kind enough to send me a prototype copy of the game, so I can just go ahead and show you how this game plays. And the way that you set it up is that you're going to have this not on the pizza card here on the left-hand side with all the toppings, and then you're going to have this on the pizza card on the right. These are all the toppings offered in the game, and like I said, you're going to be using your action cards to move them on or off the pizza, and you can also flip these cards to increase the amount of that topping that is on the pizza, which is going to multiply the points for that topping depending on how it scores for each particular player. What I like about this game is that the roll cards also have a player aid. Although the game is very easy to play and teach, it is nice to have, and I think it's pretty convenient since you do keep your roll secret. My roll is the fishy fin because I do like the anchovies the most. They're worth 4 points for me. And then the sausage and the mushrooms are each worth 2 points, but then I do lose points for the pineapples and the olives. One thing to note here is that those negative points do multiply if someone were to put a topping I don't like and then add extra of it, so I really don't want that to happen. The game does offer quite a lot of these roll cards, so you do have variety from game to game, and it also allows for a higher player count. Players are also each dealt 5 of these conversation cards at the beginning of the game, and these are going to be giving you all sorts of different actions that you can use by discarding the card. And like I said, you're going to be using that to manipulate the board, flip different cards, and get them on and off the pizza. One thing to note about these cards is that they can also add and subtract victory points at the end of the game if you haven't played them, and some of those cards are unplayable, meaning that you will have to keep them till the end of the game, but I don't see any of the unplayable cards here that have a negative value. As I mentioned before, the roll cards do remain hidden, but since I'm just playing against myself here, I'm just going to go ahead and reveal them all so that I understand the strategy of each of the players. But don't worry, I am very forgetful. This player here is a carnivore Kate, and they basically like anything that's meat and dislike anything that's not, so that does work well with my fishy fin roll. This player here is the Hawaiian Huey, so they want something that's close to a Hawaiian pizza. And this player is the Picky Pete who just likes a particular set of items and dislikes a particular set of other ones. Just taking a quick look at my hand here, I do have one card that is unplayable, but it is worth a victory point at the end of the game, so I'm just going to put that out of the way for now. But then I do have 3 cards that are negative victory points, so I really want to get rid of those. Then my last one is just a simple action card, but it doesn't add or remove victory points, so I'll probably just play that one last. And the actions here are pretty straightforward and easily outlined on the card. It just says choose one, and for the top card I can either move or flip, whereas the bottom card I can either move or flip or do both. I think to start out the game, I just want to see what the other players are going to be doing, so I'm just going to do something that doesn't affect me a whole lot, but might mislead the other players as to what I'm going for. So I'm going to play this card for its move action, and I'm just going to move over the ham because ham does not affect me in any way whatsoever, and I still have those 3 other action cards to try and manipulate things as the game comes a little bit closer to the end. One thing to note about this game is that it has a really cool end game trigger because the end of the game is triggered once a majority of players have passed in a row. Since we have 4 players at the table, that means if 3 of them were to pass in a row, that would actually end the game. This means that if I just did that and that allowed all the players at the table to have at least 1 point, it's very possible that they could all pass and I'd end up with a negative score. Lucky for me, that's not the case because this player would be getting -2 right now from that card. And then they do also have some negative point cards in their hand that they'll probably want to get rid of. So they're just going to be doing a similar move as me, and they're going to be playing a card in order to move a card. And they're going to send the onion on over and add that to the pizza. This player also has a few minus cards that they do want to get rid of, so they're going to be doing a similar action, but rather than moving a card, they're going to be flipping the ham card over. This would probably indicate that that player really wants ham, but that doesn't really affect me since there's no multiplier to worry about. It does help this player, but it hurts this player quite a bit. This player actually has 4 minus cards, so even though they really do like that ham, they still have a little bit of work to do to get to positive points here. So they are going to go ahead and move the anchovy over. That's great for me because I now stand at positive points, so I could go ahead and play a card, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and pass and see what the other players do first, and this player really does not want anchovies or ham, but they do want pepperoni, so they're going to be playing this card to move and flip the pepperoni onto the pizza. This player, of course, doesn't want the pepperoni, so they're going to be a little cheeky and do the exact opposite move. Move and flip the pepperoni off the pizza. This next player is going to be even cheekier because they're going to use that same card to put the pepperoni right back on because they know that they used that powerful card already. So there's a good chance that this is either going to stay on the pizza or at least remain flipped. Like I said, there's a bunch of these cards that are not used in the game, so it is possible that players could have multiple of those powerful cards, but they are a little bit more rare. I'm still in the same situation here, so I'm just going to go ahead and pass again, but then the next player is not in a great situation because they still have all these negative cards and they really don't want that ham on the pizza, so they're going to use their card to move it off the pizza. This player is getting pretty sick of me passing all the time, so they're actually going to use this card where they choose another player and then I have to choose to move or flip a card. And I guess I'll go ahead and throw the sausage on, which wasn't what they were hoping for, but it does help me. And thanks to that, this player is now sitting at positive 1 point, so they're going to pass. And then I'm only in a better situation, so I'm going to pass. And because we both just passed, this puts this player in a unique position of power because they can decide if they want to end the game with certainty. They only have 2 minus cards left in their hand, and then the pepperoni, the sausage, and the onion are actually giving them 8 points, while the anchovy is subtracting 2. So that is a net positive, so this player is going to pass. Everyone laughs at this player for making such a foolish mistake. Then we all reveal our final scores, and anyone that has at least a point wins the game. But of course, anyone with a little bit more points wins a little bit more. That player receives the one thing that's just a little bit more priceless than a crown, and that is a really nice mustache. As I mentioned, the cooperative mode plays almost identical to this. The only difference is you're going to be flipping these over, and then you're going to have 2 pizzas that you'll be able to assign toppings to. Players will choose one to score at the end of the game, and if everyone gains at least 1 point, then they win altogether. Really fun game here, especially because it is so easy to teach and play, and it just plays in about 10 minutes. And I really like that you don't need to figure out what exactly everyone's role is. You're just interested to see what people like and what they don't, so that you can set up the table in such a way so that the majority of players are passing when it does benefit you. As an Italian and a pizza lover, the theme doesn't hurt either. If this one looks interesting to you as well, definitely feel free to check it out, and I will have it linked in the description down below. And also launching on the 4th, we have a new expansion for the game Earth Under Siege, and this is the Nemesis expansion. This is going to be adding a bunch of new content that you can mix into the game, as well as a Nemesis mode. And I couldn't find anything on the campaign page or on BGG explicitly saying what the Nemesis mode adds, but if I were to guess, it's either going to be a bunch of new bosses or maybe a one versus many mode, just going off the name of the expansion. But if you do want to learn more about this one and what the expansion adds, you'll have to check out the campaign. But this is also a game that I did cover back when the core game originally launched, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this is a cooperative campaign game where aliens have attacked Earth, and Earth has put together its own elite team of humans in order to fight back, and players will be taking the fight to the aliens using stealth, sabotage, and ambush to push back against the enemy. Players can do things like cut the power, crawl through ventilation shafts, make use of silenced weapons, and hack the enemy databases. I think the stealth aspect of this game is something that I would really enjoy. It's not something that I see too much in these types of games, but it's something that you see a lot in video games, where you can enter into a battle where the enemy starts unaware of your presence, and you can try to do as much damage stealthily as you can to tip the battle in your favor, but then at some point you're probably going to get caught, or it just makes sense to go guns blazing, and then at that point it turns into your typical firefight. And this game even takes that to the next level, because at the start of each scenario, players can choose a strategy card, and this is going to give a few options of the player's loadout and their starting conditions. So if you want to go heavy stealth, you can do that with that strategy card, or if you want to get a little bit more creative or go guns blazing, there will most likely be some strategy cards for that as well. In each round, players can perform a series of actions by exhausting one of their 6 action tokens until they either run out of actions or they choose to pass. And players may want to pass early because you can only refresh 3 actions per turn. So if you use all 6 of your tokens, you're going to be really limited on your following turn. Although that also gives you the flexibility to have a massive impactful turn if you feel like it is worth spending all those tokens. Each character is unique and comes with its own stats for attack, defense, science, and stealth, and it also comes with its own deck of tactics cards which give them access to powerful actions and effects, and each player will develop these decks throughout the game, modifying, adding, and removing cards and tailoring the deck to the style that they want to play as and the combos that they want to achieve. Of course, players will also be finding all sorts of weapons, both human and alien weapons, and players can add this to their arsenal and further customize their character. And there's a few different types of enemies in the game. You have your basic enemies and your elite enemies, and they're going to have some amount of perception, movement, and attack, where perception is their ability to detect you. Some of these characters also have special abilities that can trigger under certain circumstances. The enemies also feature an escalation track, and as that progresses, the game's going to get harder and harder, spawning more enemies and potentially triggering alarms, which will alert all the enemies of your presence, causing them all to head directly towards your characters. Players will be performing different checks depending on their stats and the items they have, and then combat is done with a series of dice rolling and card play where players will be using special abilities, but then also trying to have a number of hits greater than the enemy's health. In each scenario, players will be trying to complete different objectives, and if they're able to do so, they will move forward throughout the campaign, and the core campaign will feature over 20 scenarios for the players to explore. And also on the 4th, we have another expansion, but this one is for the explorers of the Woodlands, and this is called the Wildscale Swamps expansion. And this is going to add a bunch of new content that you can just go ahead and add into your game, including a new hero that you can play as well as a bunch of new enemies to go up against. But the big addition here is the new campaign that's going to be added, and this is going to allow players to use campaign-specific components in order to explore a swamp and the mysteries that it has in store. The swamp maintains an eerie presence with all the mysteries it hides, but there is going to be some mystical elements as well that players might be able to use to their advantage. And because this one's an expansion, and I did cover the original game back when it launched, I do have previous footage for you that I'll just go ahead and roll for you now so you can know how the original game played and have a better idea of how this one will play as well. And this is a cooperative adventure game where each player is going to be controlling their own asymmetrical character with its own unique stats and battle dice, and players will be able to gain items to upgrade their characters throughout the game. But the way that this game plays is that at the start of the game, players will be shuffling a deck of location cards, then you're going to be shuffling a final boss into the bottom portion of that deck. deck. Depending on the adventure you're playing as, there might be a specific boss that you go up against, or if you're just playing a one-shot scenario, then you can just randomly select a boss from the deck and then add it to your game. And the game's going to play over a series of rounds until you eventually reach that boss tile, and then you engage in the final battle. Each round has 2 phases, and the first phase is the exploration phase. And during this phase, all players are going to draw a tile from the location deck and then place it anywhere on the board where it can fit together with another tile. Tiles can also have different dangers and traps with random effects if the player moves into them, and there's also a few different special tiles like a merchant that allows players to upgrade their character with new items, a water well where players can earn resources, or portals that allow players to move across the board. The next phase is the adventure phase, where all players will roll their hero dice simultaneously and then assign their individual dice to their player boards to perform different actions. This will allow players to perform different actions like movement, avoiding traps, collecting resources that they can spend to unlock special abilities, or boost attacks when they go into battle. If players enter a tile with a monster, then they can attack that monster by rolling their attack dice, and all players start with 1 standard attack die, but they can unlock more throughout the game or spend resources to re-roll their dice. The monster is represented by the smaller tile that has a few different icons on it, and that's going to let you know the power of that monster and their defense, and what you have to roll in order to defeat them, and if they have any weaknesses or strengths. Once players discover that final boss tile, then the boss is going to enter the game, and the boss behaves just like all the other monsters with a couple exceptions. Each boss has 6 different abilities, and each time a player gets into battle with the boss, they're going to roll a die, and that's going to dictate which one of those abilities activates. On top of their higher strength and defense, this will add another challenge for the players. But each boss also has a threat gauge that's going to increase periodically, and if that gauge ever reaches the max, then the boss wins and the players lose the game. So there is a sort of timer that gets activated that players will have to race against. If a player loses all their health, they don't actually get eliminated from the game. Instead, they just get knocked over, and another player will have to spend resources or health items to revive that player. But if all players get knocked out or the boss's threat gauge reaches the max, then all players lose the game. Also on the 4th, we have a new expansion for the game Dice Fights, and this one's called the Heal or Steal expansion. And I didn't cover the original campaign, so I'll let you know how the original game plays first, and then I'll let you know what the new expansion is adding. But the way that this game plays is that it is a competitive game where players are going to be fighting each other using dice. Amazing content creation here, I know. But the way that the players do this is that all players are going to be starting with 5 square dice matching their color at the start of the game, and these dice are all going to have shields, swords, and money on them. These are 6-sided dice, so you're going to have 2 of each of those icons, meaning that they're all equally distributed across the dice, and the swords are going to allow you to attack other players, the shields protect against attacks from the other players, and then the money is spent to buy more dice or to upgrade your other dice, because you do also have 5 dice that are used for tracking, and there is the 20-sided die that allows you to track your health, your 30-sided die that allows you to track your money, and then you have 3 different colored 4-sided die that each correspond to either your swords, your shields, or your money, and if you upgrade those, they're going to be multiplying the results of their corresponding icon. The game plays over a series of rounds, and at the start of each round, all players are going to be rolling all of their 6-sided die, and then optionally re-rolling any of their dice once more. Players will then be using their swords to deal damage to the other players, but keeping in mind that that damage is going to be reduced by any shields that those players rolled. After all of that's resolved, players are going to be counting up any money that they earned from dice that rolled the money icon, and then you're going to be increasing your money tracking die by that amount. At the end of the round, players can spend their gold in a variety of different ways. You can either buy new dice to add into your pool for 3 gold each, or you can increase any of your multiplier dice. It costs you 7 to upgrade your defense multiplier, 9 to upgrade your attack multiplier, and then 12 to upgrade your gold multiplier. What's really neat about this game is that the box it comes in also acts as a die itself, but in order to purchase that box, you need to spend 30 gold, which means that you need to totally max out your gold tracker die and spend it all at once in order to get access to the box. What's really nice about having access to the box as a die is that its base value is 10 anytime that you roll it, and of course you don't actually have to roll the box if you don't want to risk damaging it. You can just take the box indicating that you are the one that currently has it, and then just roll any 6-sided die in place of the box. The new expansion is going to add some new 6-sided die that you can mix into the game that have new icons for things like stealing gold from the other players, or even healing some of the damage that you've already taken. The game also features class dice, which each have their own special effect, and each player is going to be able to choose one of these at the beginning of the game, adding a little bit of asymmetry between the players. If you like dice and you like fighting, this is definitely one that you'll want to check out, and I will have it linked down below. Also on the 4th, we have a new addition to the Button Shyopolis games. They first had Sprawlopolis and then Agropolis, and now they have Casinopolis. If you're not familiar with the previous games, these are pattern building games with a ton of variability, and the main reason for this is that each card in this game is double-sided with a unique scoring objective on the back, and these are going to offer different patterns of roads, colors of terrain, or buildings that you're going to be trying to complete in order to score victory points. This version of the game also includes these slot machine icons that are incorporated into those objectives, and these objectives could have you building patterns in rows, columns, adjacencies, groups, or even have you trying to exclude different items from a pattern. What's cool about this is that there's a lot of these cards offered in the game, but you're only going to be using 3 per game, and you're just going to be randomly drawing those from the deck, which means that every game is going to have different objectives for you to try to fulfill, and they could work together or compete against each other in a whole variety of different ways. In addition to these randomly drawn objectives, there are also some base rules to the game that do allow you to manipulate your score for better or worse, and these do persist across every game that you play. For example, you do lose a point for each of the independent roads in your final tableau, so this means that you do want to connect to the roads as much as possible as you're trying to complete your objectives. I believe you do also score points for the largest group of each color, and then a really cool addition with the Casinopolis version of this game is that you do have these slot machine icons. If you're able to get 3 matching icons in a row along a road, then that's going to be scoring you jackpots that can also grant you victory points. The way the game plays is that you're going to have those 3 randomly drawn objective cards, and then the remaining cards are going to be going into a draw pile. You're going to have a small hand of cards that you're going to be maintaining, playing a card every round into the tableau, and then drawing a new card to replace it. The nice thing about your draw pile is that you can always see which card is coming next, so although you can't play it on that turn, you can plan for it in your next turn. When you play a card into your tableau, it can either go adjacent to any card that already exists there, or instead you can play it so it overlaps existing cards. The game ends when the deck runs out, and if you want to check this one out, I do have it linked down below. And I should mention that I do already own Sprawlopolis and Agropolis, and of those two, Sprawlopolis is my favorite just because I find it's a little bit more streamlined and offers the same fun gameplay with a little bit less of a rules overhead. It's kind of unfortunate because I do like the theme of Agropolis more. If I were to guess where this one fits into the bunch, I think I'll probably like this one as much or more than Sprawlopolis because these icons offer a really fun puzzle, and I don't think it adds too much of a rules overhead while still adding another layer of depth. Whichever one you choose, I think you'll be happy with this purchase. It's a really excellent game, especially if you like solo games, and if you do want to check these out, I'm sure they'll have all of them offered on this campaign, and you can go ahead and find it in the description down below. Also on the 4th, we have a new expansion for the game An Age Contrived, and this is the Folklore and Pilgrimage expansion. This is also a game I did cover in the past, so I will roll that previous footage for you so you have an idea of how the original game plays. But this new expansion adds a few new things to the base game, and it probably is a must-have if you are planning to get this game, because this is a expansion that does refine the core game. I really like what I'm seeing here. I really like when publishers listen to their audience, and this is exactly what this team has done, and they've taken that feedback and improved and streamlined the rules. It also adds a bunch of new content that you can just go ahead and mix into the game, but it also features 2 new independent modules that you can also choose to play with or choose to play without. The Folklore module adds new cards that allow for more in-depth movement for each of the characters, and the sets of cards are designed for the different gods that are included in the game, which will add a touch more asymmetry. The Pilgrimage module is a bit bigger than the previous module, but this one's going to allow players to spend their energy in order to climb up a mountain and visit different shrines and interact with different locations, which is going to offer different benefits and create different combos, but these usually do come with some different trade-offs, which I am always a fan of because it always makes the decisions a little bit more interesting. Like I said, I did cover the original campaign back when it launched, so I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. Just keep in mind that this new expansion does come with different stickers and things like that you'll be adding into your rulebook in order to modify the rules and make the game even more streamlined. If you want to check out all the details, I will have a link to the campaign down below. And this one is a competitive engine builder Euro, and it looks like a ton of fun, so it's no surprise that this one is our Discord pick of the week. And the way this game works is that players are basically trying to complete these different monuments. And in order to complete a monument, you're actually going to be trying to get your tokens onto the matching spaces of these different monument boards. And then once the final token is added on the final space, then that tile actually becomes a section of the monument, and the player who placed that final token onto that tile will be adding that to the monument and then gaining a victory point, but anyone else who also contributed will also be compensated. The tokens that players are using to complete these monuments are also used for all sorts of actions in the game, and when you do complete a section of a monument, you're actually going to be sacrificing one of those tokens, so it does gain you a victory point, but it does come at a cost. And it's performing all the different actions where I think this game gets really interesting, because each player is going to have their own player board that's divided into a bunch of different columns, with each column being associated with an action outlined at the bottom of that column. And on your turn, you can either do one of two things. You can either add a new tile onto your player board, which will make it act like a sort of conveyor belt, because when you do that, you're going to be adding that new tile to the left, adding whatever tokens you want into the empty spaces of that tile, and then you're going to be pushing all the other tiles over to the right. And then whichever tile is on the furthest right is going to get knocked off your board and put back into your supply, and you'll always have at least 2 tiles in your supply. But each of these tiles is divided into with a top portion and a bottom portion, and any of the tokens that you have on a bottom portion of a tile represents an action that you can take. And this is the other option you have on your turn. You can spend as many of these tokens in the bottom portion of these tiles in order to perform the different actions in those columns. And these actions can allow you to do different things, like deploy the tokens on the top portion of the tiles out onto the main board in order to do different things like fulfill the requirements of those different monuments, or they could even allow you to gain new tokens into your supply, which you may want to do if you've spent a lot of them building monuments, or you might want to perform the other action that allows you to move your main character around out on the main board, because I did mention this was a engine builder, and the way that you do that is by moving your character around on the board, because anywhere that you stop on the main board is going to give you some sort of upgrade that's going to improve your engine. And the different upgrades you can get can be different things like new action tiles, which will improve the action of each of the different columns, or you could get new tiles with even more spaces so that you can get even more tokens into a single tile, or you can gain an additional bonus action which you can slot into a column in the top of the column, or you can even upgrade the abilities of your specific character, which are different for each and every character in the game. And one of the other actions you can do is to actually build new action spaces out on the main board that all players can use, but when you do build that new action space, you're taking it off a section of your character's board, which when you move that token from your board onto the main board, it's going to be revealing a special ability that you will now have for your character. I think this looks like a really solid game without too many moving parts and too much complexity, while still offering a ton of fun and good decisions. And if this sounds like a type of game that you might be interested in, I have links to the campaign in the description below. And also launching on the 4th, we have a new expansion to the game Bullet, which is a very popular game, and I've only heard good things about this one. But this new expansion is going to be adding a new storage solution, as well as new heroines that you can choose to fight as. This is also a game that I did cover back when it originally launched, so just like the others, I'll go ahead and roll my previous footage for you now. This can be played cooperatively or competitively, and players are powerful heroines who use their powers to protect Earth against evil and each other. Players are each going to have their own board, and they're going to have to use actions to manipulate the patterns on that board to get rid of bullets in their play area. Whenever you successfully eliminate a bullet from your area, you actually send it to another player, and that sounds pretty fun. In the competitive mode, last player standing wins the game. In the cooperative mode, you'll actually be working together to go up against different bosses, and if you beat the boss, you win. And launch on the 5th, we have Massive Darkness Dungeons of Shadowreach, and this one is the next game coming from CMON, and it also is a standalone game, meaning that you don't need Massive Darkness 1 or Massive Darkness 2 to play this game. Unfortunately, I didn't have much time to look into this one in too much detail, but I'm sure there will be some content offered for it very, very soon. And I expect it will play very similar to the previous games, but it'll probably make some improvements and differences to the mechanisms. One thing to note is that they did also include an RPG version of Massive Darkness, so if you are a fan of the RPG experience, that might be something that you want to look into as well. I have actually covered a previous version of Massive Darkness in the past, but that was years and years ago, and I'm not going to put you through the pain of watching that video. Although I still have a lot of things I can improve on this channel and the way that I present this information, I was way worse back then, so I'll just save you the trouble and recommend that you go ahead and check out any other channel if you do want to know how the previous versions play. I've really done Massive Darkness dirty on this channel, but it does seem like a game that a lot of people love, so if you are looking for a dungeon crawler, this is one that you'll definitely want to look into. Unfortunately, I only had one day to look into all these games and put together this video and edit it, so I just wasn't able to get to this one. On that note, I should probably just get the next game out of the way as well, because this one is called Win or Die, and this one looks like a fantasy war game. This is another one that I just found out was launching this week today, so it's another one that I just haven't been able to look into. So if these images look interesting to you, or if you want to check out the campaign in the description below, that's about all the information I have right now. But this one does at least have some video content on the campaign page for you, so at least there's that. I'll do better on this after I'm done all my traveling, but that is everything I have for you this week. Hope you have a great week, and for myself, all this traveling does take it out of me, but I feel like I'm spending more time trying to recover from that Bills game more than anything else. If you're also a Bills fan, my condolences, but it looks like we're all Eagles fans now. Until next time, thanks so much for watching, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.